really, but just about, about my life growing up a little bit. This first piece isn't really a poem so much as a kind of a memoir. This is called Where the Image Ends. The story starts in a room at a small motel. At least when I imagine my childhood, that's the picture that flashes. And that image has remained unmarked in my mind for 30 years. The room is not unlike many motel rooms I've been in. A bed falling across its center occupies the majority of the space. The red digits of a clock blink relentlessly from a nightstand next to the bed. A television sits precariously atop a small wheeled stand at the front of the bed, its thin metal looking too weak for the task. And a door opposite the entrance opens to a dark bathroom smelling of chlorine. Except for the slivers of light slipping through the blinds, it is dark. We have just arrived, the taxi pausing only for a moment to allow my mother to unload her children in the light summer drizzle. Although it's morning, my mother sleeps diagonally across the bed as if she tripped across the threshold coming in. My infant brother sleeps in a small crib next to the bed, not making a sound, and my sister and I stand wide awake and staring. We wait. We wait for our mother to wake. We wait for her to turn on the lights. We wait for her to tell us why we are here. We wait. But she lies unmoving except for her back, which rises and falls with each long, slow breath. We can't wait any longer. The air in the room is muggy, that mix of warmth and moisture that makes it difficult to breathe. We shake her. We ask if we can go outside. She shoos us away, her garbled words getting weaker as we walk to the door. Outside, we run. We run like children do when they see an open space. We run, ignoring the clouds gathering above us and the wind pushing us side to side. We run across the narrow parking lot, dodging parked cars. We run to the grassy patch in the center of the parking lot where a willow tree sways over a small pond. We run around the pond. We run, we run, we run, and we stop. We are tired. The wind has quickly become cold. The small drops of rain begin falling faster, stinging our arms and faces. We are too young, too small to stay out in the storm. The weather wins, and we return to the room. And that's where the image ends, and the story begins. So that image has always been just in my mind. It probably is one of the first starting points, and I always try to imagine what it must have been like when my mother was actually married to my father, because I don't hear there's no stories about how they used to be in love. Everything was always bad, apparently. But I imagine that something was good. And so one small thing that my mother told me that was nice, and so I wrote a poem about it and about them meeting. This is called Cool Dreams and Salty Air. My father was raised on an island of music and color where the people danced despite the hurricanes that painted their houses with green plantains and smashed mangoes, leaving parents to fill their children's bellies with nothing but cool dreams and salty air. My mother didn't dance. Her life was a gray farmhouse in Pennsylvania where her father collapsed in the kitchen, searching for baking soda to soothe the burning in his heart. The empty cupboard held no cure, so 9 children were left with open mouths, eyes stinging. In Puerto Rico, the wind carried word that farms in the States paid for quick hands and backs that didn't burn in the sun. So my father came to Pennsylvania to pick tomatoes by day and drink overpriced beer by night, bartenders spitting spick all over the bottles. In Pennsylvania, small-town girls were warned to stay away from the Puerto Ricans who pour across the farms each season to harvest everything that grows in the fields so they can return to Puerto Rico with pockets full of money, leaving nothing behind but empty promises. My mother wouldn't listen to the whispers. She spoke to my father about filling her bedroom walls with the colors that flowed through her dreams, and he curled her smooth hand around a day's worth of work. No one had ever given my mother money before, so she ignored the small town stares and danced her way to Puerto Rico. This is called Chasing Chickens. My mother has a picture from Puerto Rico of a child's legs chasing a chicken across my grandfather's backyard. No one knows if the legs belong to me or my sister, but we love the story, one of the few from before the divorce that my mother still smiles at. Across town, my father refuses to eat chicken bought from the store and slices a live chicken's throat in the basement as his granddaughter watches. In Puerto Rico, I smile at the chicken picking its way through my uncle's yard, and my mouth waters as I wait for my chance to spring. When I was a kid, we spent some time in Wisconsin. My mother was engaged to be married to a man there, another very small town called Abbotsford. So we moved from small town Pennsylvania to small town Wisconsin. So this is called In Small Town Wisconsin. It was in small town Wisconsin where a mother learned to drink, sitting inside the trailer while Steve hauled sand and rock from the gravel pit, and we kids played in the backyard, feeding tall grass to the horses that lived on the other side of the fence. It was in small town Wisconsin where a mother went to Serenity for the first time, made me a leather wallet that still sits in a storage bin in my brother's basement, a promise beautifully crafted and decorated, but too large to fit in my back pocket. It was in small town Wisconsin where a mother was too drunk to watch us, so we were sent to play at a construction site, climbing on piles of broken concrete, Steve bulldozing the empty lot until the concrete fell, pinning his daughter's legs beneath it. It was in small town Wisconsin where a mother became pregnant for the third time, wouldn't stop drinking, so I had to learn to hide bottles in drop ceilings and toilet tanks, and wait for the night she would pack us into her sister's car and head back to Pennsylvania. And who would guess these things happen in small town Wisconsin? Whoever thinks about small town Wisconsin. Some of you know I'm a school teacher, and so when I was in school, I had this incident with a teacher when I was in elementary school, and I think the teacher, she had a good heart, but because she was unaware of the lives that some of her students led, she inadvertently was insensitive to how we lived. So this is called Tacos and Surplus Cheese. Mrs. Evans believed in the teacher's strike, but pulled her coat tight and crossed a picket line of her peers, allowing parents to wake their sleepy-eyed fourth graders and force them into optional attendance. The parents loved her. After the strike, they prodded the principal to put their kids in her class. My mother had no time for phone calls. Keeping the gin flow steady demanded her strict attention. So I was pushed to the bus stop, spick slurred in my ear for wearing the features of my father, tomato picker who forgot to show up for work. I was placed in Mrs. Evans' room anyway, the only brown face in the highest reading group, making her wonder aloud about my need for a haircut and new coat. Tomorrow we're going to learn how to make tacos, she declared, a principal food of the Spanish world, and she took inventory of every child's contribution. I sat silent. The end of the month meant plates of white rice and canned corn. At home, my mother offered me a block of surplus cheese, a sobering apology for empty cupboards and hand-me-down clothes. But I saw welfare engraved in every slice, no matter how fine she cut them, and knew they would only fill my classmates' throats with words that sting like scraped palms pushed onto concrete playgrounds. So I left the cheese on the counter for roaches hungrier than their fear of daylight. The day of tacos arrived, and Mrs. Evans ensured every student an equal education. Since you didn't bring anything, Jose, you must do the dishes. The rest of the students finished eating as I pulled up my sleeves and learned the value of tacos and surplus cheese. Yeah. I still like that poem because I like the interpretations that people have, and they vary depending on who that person is. And so some always say it's such what a great teacher that she taught me a lesson about hard work. And I did work as a dishwasher for years. So let me, I felt like I had to fulfill all of the stereotypical jobs. that I should do. But anyway, it wasn't my accident, but that's how it happened. So this is called But That's All That I Have. That's what my mother would say when she bought steak for herself at the beginning of each month while we ate hamburger and canned corn. She would say it again when she wouldn't share her chocolate malt balls or peanut brittle or red licorice. And we would protest that it wasn't fair that she bought gallons of gin and cartons of cigarettes but never new sneakers or roach-free apartments. But today, I can buy all the candy and steaks and shoes I want. So she's probably wondering why I keep writing these poems about her. It's really simple. That's all that I have. This is the Villanelle of the Alcoholic's Promise. Tomorrow's promise she keeps, hidden in a bottle beside the bed, while her children furiously sleep. She dreams of sober days, weeps without end, but still wakes to dead tomorrows. The promise she keeps can't stop the demon that creeps across the covers and into her head, while her children furiously sleep. So she searches for the bottle, seeks comfort from the friend who said, "Tomorrow's only a promise, keep it hidden." And the demon reaps the days her dreams and tears had fed. But while her children furiously sleep, she dreams again and again, deep dreams, the kind demons dread. Tomorrow's promise she keeps, while her children furiously sleep. So, growing up, some of us know this, we have one parent, and then we just don't know the other parent, or we barely know that person. For me growing up, my father was always this kind of foreign person from a foreign land, and, every now and then I would get a Christmas card in Spanish, and, it just kind of, I didn't know who this person was. But there were a couple occasions where he came to town, and so, of course, I guess I would go out with him and try to be kind of a father and son type thing. So this is called The Water is Dark. My father took me fishing once, backed his friend's boat into the stagnant water of the launch as the lake caught slimy green algae onto the white concrete. Factories had been feeding the lake its unwanted waste for years, turning it into a bitter old man. But the smell of dead fish dissipated as we skipped over the green-black water, my father yelling Spanish to his friend over the whine of the motor. I was 11 and didn't know my father, didn't know Spanish, didn't know how to fish, and as the land shrunk in the distance, didn't know how we would ever find our way back. When the boat stopped, I leaned over the side, trying to see the bottom. The boat leaned too, but I saw no fish, only layers of darkness. If I fell, I would be swallowed by the lake and disappear. My father tried to teach me to cast. No words, he showed me in silence until he pulled a fish from the stomach of the lake and tossed it at my feet. "Joey," he said, "this kind of fish is no good to eat." Cutting into the fish's head, he produced 2 pearl-white circles of bone. "These are the fish's brains," he said with a smile, and handed them to me. I kept those bones, but I didn't see him again for years. And the lake hasn't grown healthy. They say people shouldn't eat too much fish from it. I guess something happens when you live in all that darkness. Chuck read that poem, Pizza Land, because he knows the poetry I write, a lot of times has this, just a conflict with ethnic identity. Who are we? And then it's just complicated by this other thing. Who are you in this ethnic fashion? And so you have different parts of the world telling you different things about who you are. So that tension sometimes comes out, in my relationship with my father. This is called Kuchi Frito. I first heard the word Kuchi Frito in a movie about Miguel Pinheiro, an NYC Puerto Rican poet whose mind itched for words and heroin to soothe the childhood scars burning his skin. I asked my father about Kuchi Frito, and he complained of Pennsylvania Puerto Ricans passing pig ears across the counter, not knowing how to clean and fry sliced intestines for real Boricuas. I stood in the kitchen with a quiet smile the day my stepmother made Kuchi Frito. My father pointed to his plate, declared that I too needed to know how to eat shit in this world. But my stepmother insisted I would never eat Kuchi Frito. And my ears burned when my father left the room, kept burning as I filled my plate, chewed and swallowed, chewed and swallowed. My Puerto Rican movie. They read their lines with conviction. What do you remember about Puerto Rico? And through camera-ready smiles, they wait for me to play my part, rewind home movies in my brain full of music and Spanish and colorful characters playing dominoes on the sidewalk. I can't remember Puerto Rico, I tell them. I was young when my parents divorced and my mother carried me away, too young to remember music and Spanish and dominoes, too young to remember Puerto Rico. The couple wears their betrayal well. I have been discovered and found to be failing in the one role written for me. Reeling, I stumble to my mark, try to regain the scene and describe the one Puerto Rican movie that plays night after night in the theater behind my eyes. I remember how my father would bring buckets of crabs into the kitchen, I say. He would pick me up, place me on the counter, and pour them across the floor, and I would giggle and clap and watch them open and close their claws, trying but never finding anything to hold on to. The couple isn't convinced. There is no sound in my movie. No singing or dancing, no fights over beautiful women. There's just me and my father and buckets of crabs. But I have a picture from those days, I offer. My father smiling and sitting in that same kitchen, his chin in his hand and a sweat-stained hat on his head. The couple smiles and walks away as I stand, eyes wide, mouth open, staring like a little boy surprised by a camera's quick flash of light.
Don't rush on our account.
What's that?
Don't rush on our account. This battery will last for another 75 minutes.
The audience won't last for another 75 minutes. But you know, I finally made a trip to Puerto Rico as an adult, and it was really a nice experience, challenging in some ways, and you know, fantastic in others. This is called Buying Umbrellas. The night I arrived in Puerto Rico, the sky blinked its eyes like a sleepy father rising for work and dropped rain on my head as I ducked into a local bar. The rain continued through the night, coming and going in frustrated spurts as I stuttered to the bartender, hoping rum poured down the throat could bring Spanish to the tongue with the sweetness of sugarcane and lost childhoods. In the park down the street, the homeless snored to the beat of the rain and the chirp of coquis in the bushes as if concrete was a conga and frogs singers of sad boleros. The next morning, the last drops of rain ran down my hotel window as I prepared to walk to San Cristobal, the castle where prisoners scrawled pictures of ships across dungeon stone, their imaginations filling the sails with wind. As I stepped outside, the sky's face darkened, pushing me to the store across the street to buy an umbrella. The man sitting next to the door held an empty cup before me, his eyes emptier than the cup, his face pleading for recognition as I strode into the artificial light. At the register, I clutched an umbrella in my hand and slid money across the counter in silence. But the clerk shook her head in Spanish, unable to find the English words to explain why I could not buy an umbrella in San Juan on Sunday. I walked to the door, crumpled bills still in my confused hand, and placed them without ceremony into the doorman's empty cup. And as he tilted his head to say, "Gracias," his face became mine, his eyes my father's. I started to speak, but the rain began again, stopping my mouth with the sweetness of it. read 3 more. So,
Bring them on.
one of the other, differences, of course, between my father and I is he's a laborer and I'm working in a school. And so, as far as my father's concerned, I don't work. Because I come home clean and I wear a tie to work. I'm just, I'm fine. I don't necessarily disagree with him on some days. Some days I'm back here in Erie, down at Gannon, and sometimes I pass the guy in the hall and he's got the buffer and he's buffing the floors, and I think, do you want to trade? I wouldn't mind running the buffer for a change, But anyway, this is called The King of Tomatoes. I broke our traditional silence with talk of work and weather. This heat must be hard on old man Wiser. My father's sun-baked face creased with a smile. The only white people you see in the fields are sitting on tractors. I laughed as the picture flashed, a proud king of tomatoes astride his John Deere chariot, overlooking the ordered rows of his vegetable kingdom. Then I saw my dad's brown hands picking tomorrow's rent money from the vine, heard the constant buzz of bills in his ears no matter how much he swatted, and felt the crack of the son's whip on his bent back, and I stopped laughing. And I think I'll finish with this one.
Oh, you said 3
You
more.
said,
Yeah.
You can't shoot us down.
I already read.
Fuck us over here now.
What a
All right,
joke.
I'll read this one and then the one I was going to read. Sorry, am I going too fast?
No, you get Bobby.
Awesome.
We got at least more promise here.
Yeah, but she said,
Okay, this one I'll just read just because it's about language, and that's always a problem for me. The Spanish I speak in my dreams. I labeled the gift to Dolores E. Poppy, and the smile that creased your face when I pointed to my poems made me feel for a moment that you were proud I was your son. We drank wine made from grapes picked by your own hands and pressed into different shades of dry and sweet. Robin was trying to explain Bomba y Plena to me when I heard you wish I had learned the language. I left angry. You don't know how I struggle with Spanish, how I fight to be your son. But Papi, sometimes when I sleep, I dream in Spanish of poems and music and bottles of wine. And when I hand you a gift, I say, Feliz Navidad. And when you see it, you say, Mijo. So this one I will end with. It's a little bit of a revision of a poem I'd written a while back. And I reworked it when I was in Salt Lake City. The rock in my father's hand. My father couldn't speak English when he first came to the U.S. The cane fields had been his classroom, the place where he learned the language of his father, Otero, who swung his machete under the harsh eye of the Puerto Rican sun until he died in his chair, aged and arm-weary. At 20, my father found his way to a farm in Pennsylvania that needed strong hands and a back used to bending. The farmer led my father to a field full of rocks. Picking one up, the farmer yelled, "Rock." Then pointing to the trees at the edge of the field, he shouted, "Woods," and the rock crashed through the branches. My father learned quickly, learned all the words a field worker needs, learned how rocks can damage farm equipment, leaving it unable to beat the soil smooth and pure. When I was 20, I had long forgotten the Spanish they say I spoke when I was 4. The Spanish they say I spoke as my grandfather carried me on his shoulders through Barrio Cantito. And even though Spanish flew through my father's house and bounced off the walls, it didn't awaken my childhood voice, and I became a stranger sitting at the kitchen table as we both grew older in silence. 45 years ago, my father learned English in a field, and today I drive across Salt Lake for private Spanish classes in an air-conditioned room. And as I struggle with basic sentences, I know he keeps going to the field despite the pain in his back and the numbness in his arms. But I imagine I will return to Pennsylvania one day, sit next to my father and speak to him quietly in Spanish, tell him his time in the field is over, tell him there are no more rocks to throw.